Hi, and welcome to season one, episode four of the Family Law Attorney Podcast. I'm your host, Gerard Virga, and today we're going to be interviewing somebody I work with on the daily and have a lot of respect for, our head paralegal here, Connie Brake. Connie, welcome to the Family Law Attorney Podcast. You've been a senior paralegal here for quite a while now. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into family law.
I got into family law by necessity. I found myself in a highly contested divorce. I'm a domestic violence survivor. There was physical violence, financial abuse. So it was very difficult to raise three children, be a single mom, and fight a highly litigated custody battle. So I became really good at defending myself and advocating for my children. My case, we litigated for around 13 years. So about 4 years into that, I was able to get an attorney and he recognized how well I was able to advocate for my children. So he offered me a job.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so it's really a passion of mine to be there and advocate for families and for children going through this process. I know how lonely it can feel. You sometimes feel like you're the only one going through this particular situation. So it's been really a blessing to have this experience to be able to advocate for my clients.
Connie, when we first met and we were interviewing you, and I heard that story, it has such gravity to it because it's such a reality for so many people, and it's touching. It takes a lot to even come on here and discuss that. And I remember thinking to myself when we were interviewing, that was a lot of the reasons I got started with family law. I was going through a divorce. I was right out of law school, about a year and a half out. It was a short term marriage. I did not litigate 13 years, but I litigated longer than the actual marriage. And
Right.
in a lot of ways, I had a law degree, but I had never done any family law, and I was having to go through that process on my own. I remember reading the Florida Rules of Procedure each night for family law and waking up with those stuck to my face, trying to figure out what to do next or what was going on, and looking for answers and closure. And that struck me because I think a lot of people in our profession are drawn to it because they've lived it or because they've had some connection to it. And, I think, for me, and I can't speak for you, I kind of take that personal experience and that uncertainty and fear, and I try to remember that and make that a focus in every one of our cases and try to put myself out of the lawyer's chair and into the client's chair and think about their perspective a whole lot and where they're at in this journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a point in time where my children's father had actually left, unbeknownst to anyone, and went across country and was attempting to go into another country just as punishment.
Oh, was he threatening to take the
So
kids with him or just him
he
alone?
did. He took the children.
Wow.
Yes. So very scary time for myself, very scary time for my children. So yes, I do try to keep those things in mind and keep myself in the client's position, listen to what they have to say, sometimes just be someone for them to talk to because you do feel by yourself. So when they find someone that does understand and is wanting to advocate for them, it's a win-win for them.
It's amazing to me how sometimes a little bit of empathy can take a person who's on this emotional island
Yes.
and give them again a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of understanding. And it's something that, after a 8, 10 hour day, I always try to center myself before I make the last phone call of the day or the last email and remember that I'm dealing with a person and what they really need is someone that they can trust and they need some empathy and they need someone they can confide in. And just sometimes I remember this, it was for trial, and that's a good thing to learn for trial. I had a really tough trial coach, and he told me, son, God gave you 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. It's because he wanted you to shut up and listen twice as much as you talk. And I've tried to take that on in life. And I think that not only in trial, but in just these interactions, just being in that ear, just listening and
Yes.
letting them know that there's somebody there on the other side of the line or there in the room with them who is listening to their story because each of these cases is their own unique story. I think that does a lot for the case and it does a lot for the person that you're trying to help.
It does. And also, whenever they're in such a stressful situation, it's very frustrating. You don't ever think you're going to see the other side. for them to be able to also see that someone who is on the other side, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, gives them hope that they can come out of this successfully and live a productive life and a fruitful life and a happy life. And so to be able to also give them that hope that there is another side to life, this is just a moment in time and we will get through this, has really helped a lot of clients, giving them hope, just giving them hope.
One of, my core values is resilience. Um, life is going to hit harder than anything else. And that's from a Rocky movie, but it is so, so true. And, the ability to get back up and go. I was reading a quote the other day, and it was a champion gets up when he shouldn't. When you don't think there's anything left in the gas tank, the ability to get up and to continue to move forward and to rebuild. And, I think that sometimes in my role and in your role, we are that, force that's helping them get up and whispering the encouragement, in their ear, or showing them there is a path forward and we can get you forward and get you out of this over, it might take some time. It may be a little painful, but sometimes, true growth comes from positions of discomfort.
Yes.
But, we could get you there over time and get you back up and get you rebuilt. And, to help them along that journey, to me, it's a real privilege to,
Absolutely.
to be able to offer that. And it's one of the things that's always drawn me to family law. There's other types of law, but to me, the personal, relationship and the personal aspects of the life are really vulnerable in the middle of a family law case, and you probably get to know your client a lot better on all aspects. I joke around and tell them, a lot of times in the consults where I'm trying to keep them open and transparent and calm and not feeling isolated, that if you tell me something I haven't heard, I might give you a better price on the retainer. Joking around with them, trying to get them past that because they think that they are the only person who's ever been in this predicament, or only had they're an island and they're, the unicorn that, this has never happened to anybody before. And in reality, it's happened hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over. And, letting them know that you're not this oddity and you're still a human being and there's going to be a life after this, and getting them to that point, to me, is the most rewarding part of our jobs. So
Absolutely.
so Connie, many of our listeners are going through difficult family law transitions. What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of being a family law paralegal?
Being able to give the hope to our clients, being able to advocate for them. Sometimes it's sharing my story just so they know they're not alone. Sometimes it's listening and letting them. I don't even know how to express what a privilege it is for me to be able to be a family law paralegal and be there for the clients. It's such a passion of mine. I absolutely love, love, love what I do.
That's good. Because if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, is the expression. And I think sometimes we all need to, whether you're in family law or any other field, kind of stop, take a break, and think about why you did it in the first place.
That's right.
And rekindling that fire and that passion. And I think with our job, a lot of times when I see someone leave with a new beginning and it's a good new beginning for them, and they're starting a new chapter. It's difficult anytime they're closing a door and a new one's opening. And I see that new beginning, and I see that spark of hope. I think back to, where I was at, and I see a little bit of myself in that. And I think that, that's a true gift that you could give to somebody, is just that spark of hope that there's a plan now, there's a process. I'm not the only person who's been in this position. And now I have a team of people and professionals with my lawyer, my paralegal, who are committed to me to help me down the process, to help me get there, and to stand by my side during this time. I think that's, that's better than any check or anything else that you could get. And you go home at night, you feel good about that when you put your head on the pillow about maybe what you contributed to the world that day. So, in your years of working in family law, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned helping families navigate this legal process?
Listening, listening. I think it's one of the most underrated things that we do. I mean, the pleadings and the trials and all of those things are necessary to get them to the next point in their life. But just listening and letting them know that it's going to be okay, that we are there for them. We will see them through this and guiding them through that. That's the most rewarding thing.
I think that probably the most valuable lesson I've learned as being a family law attorney isn't in any book or CLE, but I think that with age comes wisdom and experience, comes wisdom. And as a lawyer, you come out of law school and you're kind of primed that this trial, this hearing, this case is about me and I'm the one on trial and it's my ego and how good can I question and can I tear them up on cross examination and what crafty lawyering can I do to, help my client? And I'm not saying that all that's not important. It is very important to know everything you know about the law and lawyering and trial advocacy. But, along the way, I've learned that it's not about me. It's about being a voice for somebody else. And to try to get into their shoes, into their mind, and then bring their story to life. And in cases where sometimes you may have one spouse that's the more dominant personality, and that's kind of set the tone for the entire marriage, is letting that person who's been the victim perhaps of verbal abuse or control. A lot of times there's what I think the law is recognizing now, coercive control, is to be the voice of saying, no, we're not doing that anymore, or to put them back on their heels a little bit with a cross examination, or to call it out with the behavior, and to see that person just kind of go from cowering to a sense of pride. But, I would say the most valuable lesson is it's not about me, it's about them. And
Absolutely.
the quicker you learn that it's not about you and it's about the people who've put their life in your hands, the better off I think anybody in this field will be. That's where, to me, the best advocacy comes from. So, as a senior paralegal, you've seen countless cases and you've had a lot of experience. I don't want you to, disclose anything confidential. Out of those, like, is there a scenario or anything that reminds you why you do this work every day?
I can tell you one of the things that has really inspired me lately. I have seen a large trend of fathers who are really stepping up in a new level and advocating for their rights between them and their children. Historically, it kind of appeared that it was the other way around for a long time. But I've really seen fathers advocating for their children, and I think that is just a beautiful thing to take a moment and recognize the fathers as well as the mothers. So that's been real inspiring. We've had a lot of that lately, and it's healing also.
I think that, that's something that's really important to take a moment, because I've been doing this. I'm going on 21 years of doing this, seen hundreds and hundreds of cases in that time. But, when I first started out, I will never forget. I was a young lawyer. When you're a young lawyer, back then they were doing the hearings in chambers. Some places they still do that. Some we have courtrooms now for family law. And at the end of a case, I just said, Gerard, men go to work and women have kids. And man's job is to pay for the kids, and the woman's job's to raise them. And then, of course, I got a ruling that I was not happy with because I was, representing the father in that particular case. But the way the law in just the last 20 years has evolved to really recognize the role of both parents, and that one person is not just the provider and one person is not just the caretaker. And that while each parent is different and each role might be different, but they're both so important and vital. I mean, I think the law, our presumption now of equal time sharing is now getting on that footing. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine who was in charge of a mediation program, and she was talking, we were doing a hypothetical, we were doing a mediation training, and she was talking about, well, mom's the one who cooked breakfast, and mom's the one who took him to school, and mom's and I was like, well, where was dad? And she's like, well, he was at work. I was like, well, how was mom able to afford to do all those things? What sacrifices did dad make to make sure mom could be home to do the breakfast and take the kid to school? And I said, it's not that dad may not love the child as much, but if we're starting a whole new reality, then dad may be just as capable of doing all those things, and one parent shouldn't benefit over the other. And, it should be more of a partnership. And I think the law and society are finally making some ways, because it used to be, in most of my cases when I first started out, dad would get about 4 days a month. You'd get a Friday and a Saturday, a little bit of Sunday, have the kids back maybe by 4 or 5. And that was, you get one of those weekends twice a week or twice a month. And then, you might get some holiday and some summer, but it was not really a whole lot of time. and the heartache I saw when I would leave the courtroom with those schedules. I'm glad I don't see that quite as often anymore, and that we've gotten a little more progressive and fair on parenting and realize the value of both parents. So I'd have to agree with you there.
And not only the value of both parents, but of the overall wellness of the children. It is so important for children to have, if at all possible, both parents involved in their lives. Both parents bring two different aspects of life that will teach the child in later years how they should act or react, or this job or this tool. They need both parents. They really need both parents. So if at all possible, let them have both parents, because it's more important for the children's mental well-being.
Right. And just like earlier, I was saying, one of the greatest lessons was, realizing it's not about me. I find myself often reminding parents, it's not about you. It's about the kids.
Absolutely.
And it's not no one wins a custody case. There are no winners in a custody case. What I tell people is we are mitigating damage. And how can we best mitigate that for you, for your former spouse, or for the other child's parent, maybe if you weren't married? And how do we most importantly mitigate that for the child and let them see that mom and dad can still be around each other for my sake, that they can still, they may not love each other, but they love me. And that's all that's important. But let me ask you this, family law is high stress. At times it's high volume. And then there's been a big push for a lot more speed in the family law process to getting these cases to resolution. A lot tighter trial calendars and CMC calendars, which, kind of ratchets up the stress quite a bit on how fast can I move this to keep the court system happy while balancing out the needs of the parents and the families and the children. How do you, as a paralegal, balance out the stress and the day-to-day anxiety, that you have in your job, and balance that with the need for, having so much empathy? How do you have any techniques for that, or any ways that you kinda get those things balanced?
You have to be able to compartmentalize. There's an aspect of our job that is focusing on the job of working the case, and there's an aspect of our job that is empathizing and advocating with our clients. And you really have to look at those as two separate things. You can't allow yourself to be so busy and so cold that you forget why you're doing it, and that we are dealing with humans. We are dealing with their lives. We are dealing with their traumas. It's not my trauma, it's their trauma. And so you have to maintain the ability to empathize and have compassion for that. So my stress at the end of the day is nothing of what my client's going through. And I can't put I can't put my stress on my client. My job is to take my client's stress upon me. And so then I can compartmentalize that and do what I need to do for them.
Well, I learned a trick kinda early on, and it kinda still applies in the digital world, but, it was much better maybe to the paper file world when we would have the paper files. A lawyer I worked with would take all the files and pull them out, put them on his desk, and he would put sticky notes on them about what work needed to be done. And as the associate, a lot of those files would end up on my desk, and I would come in and there'd be a 2 or 3 foot stack of files on my desk, and the paralegals would find themselves in the same. And that was a primitive way of doing case management with sticky notes and file folders. But I used to tell myself that like, each one of those folders wasn't a folder. It wasn't a case number. It was a family in transition. And so I still try to think about each case when I'm now on the hard drive or the server, that each one of those is a family that needs my help, that needs my attention, that deserves my time, and then not letting it become just a number on the docket. Nothing upsets me worse than a family law case gets treated like the number on the docket. And we get sometimes caught up a lot more in the logistics and the bean counting and how long something has taken and how long has this case been open than we do what does this family need. If they need a speedy resolution, then let's give them a speedy resolution and move it toward a trial. If they need time to heal and they need time to see how a temporary parenting plan might be working out for them and for the children and everybody's schedule, then I'm of the opinion, give them the time. I'm of the opinion, treat them like people. It's not just a number on a docket, it's a family. And I think sometimes with a lot of these new rules that family law is seeing and these administrative pushes to get cases over, And, 6 months to a year, we're losing a lot of the humanity.
Absolutely.
Because I have historically not been an advocate to doing mediation very early in the case, because sometimes I find people aren't emotionally ready to talk, and to get them to the position to talk might take a couple of months for them to cool off and to see that there's life after this, and then be in the right mind, to have these conversations because they're difficult. And then, maybe we can hit some things that we agree on and get to yes on some topics. But to me, the impetus lately on how fast we can move the case is a disservice, because if I can take an extra month or two and get them to talking through mediation, through settlement discussions, and let them have more of an active role in building their future and deciding what that future is going to look like, as opposed to us going through trial and people being cross examined and the judge, seeing them at the worst point in their life and putting this into public display. To me, we just create a lot more scar tissue. Now, in a lot of cases, it's unavoidable. One party's going to have a trial. They're going to have to be made a believer that this is going to happen. And you're going to have to pay alimony, or you're going to have child support, or, they're not going to take a civil way out. But to me, pushing too fast, sometimes you lose that humanity.
You really do. You really do. And you're right. You do need to have time for people to heal some and let cooler minds prevail, because cooler minds think better. So it really I agree with you 100%. I think the push to get these done quicker is really a disservice to the families.
I think that, I was having a conversation with another colleague today, and it's not something that I really know of that's in existence. But I was thinking, it's like, how could we balance out need for efficiency and quick closure of a case? And how could we, let some families have additional time? And I thought back to my days of when I did criminal law, and we had something called a demand for speedy trial. And then the state had so much time to bring you to trial, and you could, have an opportunity to clear your name within a given period of time. And what I was thinking would be great is if family law had a mechanism like that. If one of the parties thought, hey, this has got to get fast tracked, this has gone on too long, I want this over, I want to have my trial, or maybe it's the party who realizes the other side's never going to come around to good solid negotiations, that there's a mechanism that they could get out quick and get it to a trial, then maybe that should be left on the parties more so than the state or someone in the court administration who's just looking at stats. And so I think that might be an answer. And I'm on a few family law committees. It's something that I'm going to try to bring to the forefront. Maybe we could have a balance.
That would be a great idea.
Yeah, some way to trigger it.
That's a really good idea.
Enough's enough. I have to have a trial. This is not working, versus I want more time and I don't want to be put into this bucket of efficiency. I want to have a social investigation, which might take a couple of months. I want to test drive a temporary schedule for these kids to see how 50-50 might affect them, or how 60-40 time sharing is. And can dad really get them to school? And can mom, get off work early enough to get them from daycare or after school care? And to see how this works. Because a lot of times I think when people start working it and they get a little time, it's not so bad. This is actually working out. Or, and some of those fears go away. And then, why I love my job. I love going to trial. I love cross examining. I don't make a family any better in the future by doing that. When you have to go sit years later at this child's high school graduation, no one feels closer to their ex spouse, or because their lawyer cross examined them for 4 hours. You know what I mean? That's just going to create more scar tissue and bad blood. So I think that, sometimes speed comes at the cost of healing. And, it's something I'm going to really try to make a focus on when I go to my next committee meetings, is let's focus on healing and not just speed. This is not just simply,
They're not cookie cutters.
yeah, we're dealing with it. And, in family law too, personal injury, I'm not taking away from it. It's a hard, they have their challenges, but you're dealing with a car wreck, let's say, and the damages. With us, we're dealing with real estate issues. We're dealing with children's psychology and children's issues. We're dealing with retirement. We're dealing with alimony. We're dealing with lots of issues, domestic violence. And sometimes healing takes time. Healing cannot always be wrapped up in 120 days. And sometimes, even when the marriage doesn't, the people don't, end the divorce and get back together and reconcile, when I say healing, that they've healed to the point where they can now coexist to some degree. post divorce for the sake of their kids and their family. That takes time, and that does not fit into an administrative 120-day calendar. And I think it's something that, there's been a big push for at the expense of the families we're trying to help. So, how, as a paralegal, how does your role complement the work of a family law attorney?
I kind of look at it as we are our first line of defense for I guess I should say advocacy for our clients, between the clients and the attorney, because we talk to the clients more. We have the time to listen to them a little bit more. So we can give all of that information to the attorney, that sometimes the clients develop a relationship with the paralegals that they feel almost intimidated to do with their attorney. So to be able to give that information to the attorney so that they could advocate for them, maybe in a different way that they had not thought of
Right.
without that information. That's one of the most important roles that we have, is communicating between the client and the attorney.
I think that, one of the things that amazes me after, 20 years is how transparent the client is often with the paralegal. And then the paralegal tells me, when you get on the phone with them, expect this. And then I get on the phone with them and I don't hear anything about what they've told the paralegal. And I have to actually just start, well, Connie told me, or and there is a degree of, I think, intimidation sometimes talking to the lawyer. But, if anybody out there is listening, don't be intimidated by your lawyer. We might look intimidating. When we go to court, we do intimidating things at times. We cross examine, we ask pointed questions, but we're people too. And that clear line of communication to the paralegal, to the lawyer, it helps me as a lawyer get to know who you are. It helps me get to know what your case is about. And the more I know those things, the more I relate to those things, the more, when I am in court, I'm your voice. I'm your voice. And I want to tell your story, and I want to tell it in an accurate way. I want to tell it in a way that captivates the judge. And, to me, that's really, something that your trial advocacy will suffer if you don't know your story, if you don't know the characters in the story, you don't know what's happened to them, you don't know where they're coming from, you don't know what's really important to them. And so, I think that's a really interesting phenomena, that the paralegal gets often more information. Even if you have all the time in the world, they just don't want to tell their lawyer sometimes.
I think when you're dealing with people who are coming from any type of trauma, whatever the trauma is in their life at the moment, and then you walk into a situation where you see someone of an authoritative figure, which is how society sees attorneys and judges and things like that, it's very intimidating to take yourself out of that trauma and realize that they're advocating for you. Whereas with a paralegal, they see us more as an equal,
All right.
so they don't have that intimidation, so they share a little more freely with us. So it's really important for the paralegals to listen to their clients, get the information to the attorney, and then also we need to advocate for our attorney to our clients
Right.
and break that barrier down so that then the attorney and the client can have that same relationship and they feel comfortable with telling them things. So I really think that that's what it is. It's been in my experience that the intimidation just comes from that place of trauma and being able to trust an authoritative figure after that.
Well, I will say this, and to every paralegal out there listening, there's no great lawyer that does not have an even greater paralegal behind them. Because, in my opinion, the paralegal does so much of the work that the lawyer gets the credit for. And it's really the paralegal that deserves the praise for the work, from the pleadings to putting the file together to sorting through the 8,000 text messages, and marking the important ones. It's a great movie. I don't know if if you've ever seen it, Connie, Aaron Brockovich.
Yes.
The paralegal often is the driving force who's spoon feeding the attorney the information and keeping the attorney on point. And, I think a lot of times, people think of a paralegal just as a secretary, and it's so much more than that. They're an active part in the case, and an active member of the team, and really a driving force. They're people that, the legal system would not function if there were not a team of professionals behind the lawyers, behind the scenes. When I say paralegal, I'll include clerks of the court, even though they're not technically a paralegal, doing the same thing for the judges, law clerks who help the judges. Some law firms have law clerks, which are either law students or young lawyers, maybe waiting for their bar results to come in, who are writing out memos or in the courthouse drafting draft orders for the judges. There's a whole team of people besides the lawyer and the judge. That's just the tip of the iceberg, but the majority of the iceberg is below sea level and people don't see it and they forget about it. But that's where, rubber meets road. A lot of the work is done and the vast majority of it. So to all paralegals out there, this is my chance, my soapbox, my chance to tell you guys thank you for all your contributions that you make to the legal system and to helping people find justice. So, Connie, one thing, you and I, we work together and we're always talking about growing and growth, and we like to think of ourselves as growth minded people and doing something different, and you've been really undertaking a big challenge here in Northwest Florida to help our community grow. Can you tell us about that for a moment?
Yes, we are starting a chapter, Emerald Coast chapter of the Paralegal Association of Florida. I had experience with them when I was working in Central Florida as a paralegal, and I knew how great they were. And I'd taken some time off to take care of family members and things. And so whenever I started working as a paralegal again with the firm, I realized we didn't have anything like that in this area. And I thought we were missing, the paralegals in this area were missing such great advocacy for that community. So I really wanted to start a chapter in Northwest Florida to provide that community, the camaraderie, the CLEs, the continued education, because it's hard to get sometimes in this area without having to travel long ways to go find these things. So to be able to have these things available in our area and support our paralegal community was something I really, really have a passion for doing.
Well, I think that that's going to mean so much to our area if we can get this off the ground. And, I commend you and applaud you for your efforts because, Connie's talking about CLEs, those are continuing legal education classes and credits and it's training. It's professionals coming to speak and to bestow knowledge and experience on paralegals and to bring them more resources, so they can professionally develop. And, like, growth is one of our goals. And it's not just growth at our law firm, it's growth to the whole family law area and, getting the experts up here who can teach these classes, who can do these trainings, who can provide this guidance and mentorship. It's only going to help each and every case because each and every case has probably got a paralegal working it. And, we do struggle sometimes, being in when we're in Northwest Florida, as there's sometimes not as many resources. So trying to bring those resources to our area hopefully will be groundbreaking and create professional growth, not only at our firm, but in all the firms who have paralegals that take advantage of this. So, Connie, if there's paralegals out there listening and they want to be part of this, what do they need to do?
They need to either reach out to myself or they could go on the Paralegal Association of Florida.com and fill out an application to become a member. There's so many reasons to be a member of this association. We talked about earlier about the stresses that are in family law. Two of the highest professions for the rate of suicide are family law attorneys and mental health counselors, social workers. So that trickles down to paralegals as well. Well, the Paralegal Association of Florida, they offer a free Thursday at lunch login to Zoom for a 1 hour session with a therapist,
That's amazing.
just to discuss any issues you may be having, the stresses you may be dealing with. If you're dealing with a particularly difficult case, because some of our cases are struggling,
They're
you're
sad.
struggling emotionally to deal with
They're sad.
the facts of the case. So you can log in totally free, no limits, every Thursday at lunch. Log in. You can go to the Paralegal Association of Florida, get the Zoom link, and log in and get a therapy session for free. And then you have your community of paralegals that you can also lean on, learn from, guide to, all these things that we can do with that. We also want to reach out to the community because our clients are our community, our fellow paralegals are our community. So we will also be reaching out to organizations like Children's Advocacy Center. Not just donating, but actually donating our time uh, to see what they need, how we can help our community and nourish our community. So lots of reasons to join the association, and I'm really, really proud to be a part of it.
Well, I think you hit on some very, not discussed topics a lot, but as a family law attorney or family law paralegal, we're trying to help all these people with their emotional situations and their darkest spots of their life for many of them. And if you're not physically and mentally in a good place, you don't take care of yourself and you can't take care of the people who count on you. And so I think that's a big advantage of having a group like this. Another thing is, giving back. I think a lot of times when we go to sometimes I've gone to some bar courses, some CLEs, and they've said that I think lawyers rank right under used car salesmen for how society at one point viewed us. And I do think that you can tell I have kids. I think it's a Spider-Man quote, like with great power comes great responsibility and the ability to give back to the community, whether it's through the Children's Advocacy Center or other organizations
Any
out
great
there, many,
organization.
many great ones to give
Yes.
back to your community. Now, Connie, is this organization, is it just for family law paralegals or can any paralegal join?
It is for any paralegal.
So if you're out there and you're doing personal
Any
injury, estates, criminal law, this is not just for the family law paralegals. It's for the whole community of paralegals in our area. So, Connie, if hopefully some people are out there listening and they want to get up with you, will you tell them how they could contact you if they have questions?
Sure. You can contact me at Connie.Brake at the Virga Law Firm. That's the easiest way to contact me because I'm there all the time. So I will get the email and get the information to you.
This is the lawyer coming out. So, ma'am, can you spell that for the court reporter? And any of you paralegals out there who have a question and want to speak with Connie, also feel free to call our office. The phone number is 850-818-0236. And just tell them that you're a paralegal and that you're thinking about joining, and they'll get you through to Connie or get a message to Connie and she'll call you right back. But the more the merrier. We want this to grow. We want the community to grow. We want the number of professionals in our area to grow. So, Connie, thank you for all
But
that
grow,
you.
but have the support and resources they need.
Yes. Yes, and we can never in life have enough resources. Connie, we didn't touch on everything, but we've touched on a good bit, but we got to kind of bring it to a close. So, I'm going to ask you the kind of a off the cuff question here. If you had to give, if you had a magic wand and every client you could give them one piece of advice and they would take it, memorize it, and never ask that question again, they would know it. What would that advice be?
Do not let your trauma define you. Let it be your motivation.
That's excellent. Well, Connie, we appreciate you taking time today out of your busy schedule. And we've been shooting these things on Saturday. So thank you for giving up your weekend time. I know how precious that is to you and your family. And we will definitely have you back on. We'll touch base again on the Paralegal Association and see how that's going. And we'll follow you guys, because I know you're going to get this thing off the ground and get enough members. How many members do you need to get it started?
You need 10. I think we have 9 at the moment. I'm waiting for one more application and then everything's going to get sent off.
So we are one away from having this, make this
But
a
the more the
reality.
merrier. The more we can come in with, the better our chapter starts out with, and the more we can start offering our members in our chapter immediately. So the more the merrier, please.
So, Connie, what's the application cost?
Right now it's 109, but that's for a 14-month, I think is what they're doing right now instead of a 12-month. So you actually get 2 extra months.
$109.
109.
Okay, I will tell you what, if you were number 10, the Virgo Law Firm will pay the 109 for your application to get this off the ground. So
Thank you
call
very much.
call Connie and let's make this a reality for our area. And Connie, you have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks so much. You as well. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.